and said something very constructive with a little bit of love around the edge, rather than losing it? Have you ever? It might be in the grocery when the person is chit-chatting with the other, and you're trying to check out because you've got to get back, and they're having a conversation. It can be something as small as that, but it's usually something small that triggers us. So you may be familiar with fire in control, fire out of control in your own being. Does anyone here know the practice of Agnisara? If not, Nikki is she's your girl. You do know it. Then you're working with fire. Eka, yes? Good to see you. Yes. You're working with your inner fire in a controlled way. You're not controlling it, but in a controlled manner. You're leading fire and taming fire and focusing and channeling fire for productive transformation. And this is how we want to be working with fire. And when it's out of control or burning wildly, that is similar to when we're losing it at the grocery counter because it's not going our way, or we just can't quite manage the fire that's really stimulated from something else. So we'll get into all of that and how we can use it productively. And I'd like to ask you this also. How many of you have done something really good and really productive for yourself or your family or for others in the midst of a storm? In the midst of a physical storm, in the midst of an internal storm, which way are you thinking? What makes you laugh? The internal storm?
Sometimes they go together.
Definitely. Who said that? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Or the internal is what's causing the external. Yeah. So during the storm, it's not usually the best time to do something good. During the storm, a serious storm, say tornadoes or high winds or a destructive storm, everyone's trying to survive. They're trying to protect and survive. And that is not the time that most people are available to get together to start something really good for humanity. The concern is immediate. And too far before the storm hits, people are not engaged and not interested. You might have seen on the Secret Weather Channel that a tornado is only 60 miles away, and you run out into the yard and tell the neighbors, quick, quick, bring in the swing sets and the lawnmowers. High winds are coming, it'll crash the houses, let's get everything inside. And they all look at you and say, we're enjoying the sun and enjoying swimming, and relax, there's no storm, it's sunny. So trying to get something done that is very good too soon also will not engage your fellow countrymen. It is not the time. After the fire or after the storm, people are shocked, people are in grief, there are no resources, everyone is stunned. There's no way to start something good. Nobody has the wherewithal and the resources aren't available. They all got blown away or whatever the situation may have been. But right now happens to be the perfect time for people collectively to do something good and productive, positive and auspicious and transformative for humanity right now. Not just today, but this year and next year and into 2019. This is the time that is close enough to an increasing decline to get people's attention. It already had your attention. I think that's what helped you respond to coming today. And to create something good, to create a plan and to start that strategy such that it might actually help minimize the storm. And certainly it will create an infrastructure such that after the storm, all is not lost. There's still a plan and there's something ready so that when people are distraught or shocked or in grief, there's not a loss. There's something ready. That's what we're talking about in terms of structure of enlightened activism. There needs to be a plan, there needs to be forethought, there needs to be a collective, and there needs to be an outcome. And then the timing of how that is executed is critical. And that would maximize a plan such as this. So you might know the term Yuga. Yuga is used in yoga, or if you're studying the Vedas, or if you're reading the scriptures, or even just connecting to the Bhagavad Gita, you might run into the term Yuga. It means a time period. And in the cycle of humanity, there are 4 time periods that keep repeating again and again. Talk about karma. We're doing it again and again. And the hope is that we will stay in the more sattvic period called Sat Yuga longer. But this is not always the case. Historically, we've been in Sat Yuga and then declining to the 2nd and the 3rd Dwapara Yuga, and to the most bottom of the barrel mindedness called Kali Yuga, and we're in the Kali Yuga. Now, if we look around, and Jean and I drove around, Jean Mazzi from San Francisco, Sri Yoga, brought me here today. And we drove around Novato a little bit when we came in, and I said to Jean, who are the people who would not want to live in Marin County? And she thought about it, and she mentioned a few, the urban delights, and a few people from East Coast maybe we considered and laughed a little bit about it. But our world, our personal lives, our surroundings, if you agree, are really okay. We're not really too bad off, right? I mean, consider the rest of the world and what we see. If it's fake news or real news, there are a lot of people who aren't living nearly as comfortably as we are internally, in ourselves, and externally. And I'm being light about this. It's clear that we live very comfortable lives in this country for the most part. And so when you hear something like we're in the most declined time frame of humanity, we are the least intelligent, the least creative, the least nourished of all the 4 cycles of humanity, it seems odd. Wait a minute. I feel nourished and fine and joyful, and yeah, there's a lot going on, but I mean, really? The worst of it? It's simply because we don't have memory back 10,000 years ago to recall what it's like to live in a different consciousness, what it's like to live at a time when much of what we experience and what is ingrained in us didn't exist. Love was such and unity was such that many things that we experience and do just wasn't even touched upon. It was a much higher consciousness, and intelligentsia was high, and care for one another was not a topic, it was understood. Now we have topics about how to handle conflict and how to raise children, and at that time all of this was innate, and people were so connected to the divinity that there were no discussions and there was no field called psychology. It wasn't. So if we can just leap into that history for a minute and imagine a time that's hard to imagine, then it's easier to accept that this is the lowest time. No offense to any of us. It's just what it is. And we may have lived then too. So it's called the Kali Yuga. You know the term Kali, the mother, the divine mother who slashes and cuts asunder, but in wonderful ways. We'll get to that. This is the Kali Yuga. Now, it's been going on for 5,000 years, so it's not new news, and it's nothing to create concern for. It's not like all of a sudden something really bad has happened. We've been on a continuum, and we've been living this way for a long time. And here's how the Puranas, or Vedic scriptures, talk about the Kali Yuga. See what you think of this. These are some of the signs that Kali Yuga is present. One is that people will eat cooked food outside of their home. Restaurants. In those days, you harvested food and you cooked it fresh and served it to your family and friends and ate it right then. Ate it right then, and it was consumed, and there weren't leftovers, and it wasn't sold in the market prepared by other people, especially people you may not even know. That wasn't done. So when that starts happening, it's a sign that people have moved that far away from nature. To us, that sounds pretty extreme, but for that time, this was extreme. It was a decline. Another sign is that water will be cut off from its source. People will hydrate from dead water. Water cut off from its source is called dead. It's no longer part of the living flow. It's been isolated and separated, and that's called dead water, or non-nutritious water, and that's how people are being hydrated. We buy bottled water. There will be far more small four-legged creatures than large four-legged creatures. This can be, all of this actually can be implied internally as well as externally, but from the external point of view, this is saying that cows who provide nurturance through almost every product they have, the dung is used, it's antiseptic, antibacterial, it's used in hovens, fire ceremonies, it's used in households in certain places for all of its auspicious properties. TMI, but it's true. And cows provide milk, and from milk comes matar and yogurt and ghee and many other products that would sustain a family and a kingdom. Horses represent your senses and your mind. So healthy, wonderful horses are indicative of a healthy mind and healthy senses that are managed and under control. There will be far fewer horses and cows and more dogs and cats. It's just indicating decline. Virtues are declining. And people will have no regard for one another, and they'll hurt one another without care. we'll lose our sensitivity. We'll lose our discrimination. People won't feel safe. They won't feel safe with their neighbors. There will be violence. And this indicates that the Kali Yuga is here. I think we can connect to some of those signs. There's something much more profound that's spoken about it, but for the sake of this conversation, that helps us depict this time frame as opposed to another time frame. So when the Kali Yuga started was right after the Mahabharata war. You've heard of the Mahabharata, the great epic from which the Bhagavad Gita comes, where Krishna was guiding Arjuna, and Arjuna was tasked through his dharma to fight his own family and his own teachers, and he was paralyzed. He just couldn't go about it, and Krishna was explaining, essentially, look, it's already, after a long dialogue, look, it's already been done. I, as the creator, have already done this for you. You must simply act it out. That's your dharma. But it's already been done subtly. Now go and execute this. This is your dharma. This prevails actually throughout the Kali Yuga, that much is done for us, and we simply go through the actions. And that should be a reassuring concept. So we'll come back to that as well toward the end of this afternoon. But at the end of the Mahabharata, everything following that war was so desolate, that grief was so heavy, that people were paralyzed. They had lost all men between, say, 12 and 50 or 60. Everyone wiped out in the war. There were women and children left and elderly. But in those days, it was the man who did much of the labor and provided for the family. Now in India, or in that culture, the women are doing a lot of the work, but then it was different, and everything was topsy-turvy. And so it's been since then that humanity has perhaps been rising out of that darkness, but not far enough to really propel ourselves into a better time or a higher mindset. And so here we are in the Kali Yuga. And it's during this time that violence grows and hatred grows and understanding declines and reaching out and connecting. Granted, we have social media, but it's not the same as really being one with those that you're in contact with. Really believing and understanding that this is one consciousness. And if someone in this room is feeling pain, it's on all of us, and we disperse that such that the one feeling pain can have the strength to start to come forward and out. That kind of oneness. But all is not lost in the Kali Yuga, especially as the decline begins to accelerate, which is where many say we are right now. Because during the Kali Yuga, you can do, not that this is our goal or intention, but it is something to take note about, you can do the least amount of spiritual practice and gain the greatest fruit in the shortest amount of time. Is anyone here doing mantra japa? Do you practice meditation with a mantra? All right. So you know what it's like to sit for an hour or half an hour and do your practice, and you know the tapas, or the effort that you put into that. You know some days you're very inspired to do it, and other days it slips by a little, and maybe the second day, and then you come back again, and then you wrestle with guilt, and then you justify, and this whole dance goes on. In the Kali Yuga, our concentration is less, our gumption is less, our discipline is less, comparatively speaking. And this is the way that things are organized, that the greatest fruit, you can accelerate the quickest in Kali Yuga in your spiritual growth. Let's put it that way. That is a huge promise and a reality, and something that we should all take note about right now. Intensify your practice starting today. You will make great leaps. And this is something to really pay attention to. So one takeaway, accelerate your practice. And let me just say at this point, if there's anyone here who is not practicing with a mantra but would like to know more about what that looks like and how to begin, and you would like to stay after, please do. And we can talk about that, and I can put you in direct touch with a way to get started today or as soon as you want to. All right. So we have this promise that in Kali Yuga we can do wonderful things in terms of spiritual growth, and that is huge. And that almost helps balance the rest of the news that we just spoke about. Let me take you back to those ancient days for just a moment. If we lift the backdrop of Novato and the US and just pull that curtain up for a second, and picture the Ganga, this beautiful, crispy whitish turquoise river flowing. And on the bank of the Ganga, there's a beautiful green forest, and birds are singing, and all sorts of flowers are blooming. And there's a rishi sitting there, perhaps with his eyes closed or her eyes closed, or perhaps open. And that, you know, rishi is a sage, an enlightened being. The rishi is perhaps sitting in front of a fire and offering with mantra, or perhaps sitting in meditation, but that this is happening. And just take yourself there for a moment. And we're going to now go into the cities at that time. And what was happening was something very similar to what's happening now. Commercialism and consumerism was the god of that age. People were running amok and shopping like crazy, as we sometimes find ourselves now. And again, it's relative. So we may not be a shopaholic, but compared to other days, commercialism is definitely taking hold now. And virtues were declined, and people were just awful with one another, and it was unmanageable by human beings. Everything was going down. So much so that the sages who had always made themselves available through ashrams to teach seekers at that time said, you know, we're really not making a dent here. Our students aren't even listening to us anymore. And they took to the Himalayas and went deep in their caves and did their meditation to keep assisting humanity subtly. They said, after all, you've done this yourselves. You created this destiny. We've been trying to guide you. You're not listening. We can't communicate with you this way any longer. We'll go silently and send the vibes and do the profound work that the sages do to help you grow. But it's tough right now. And so the devas, or the good guys, devas are light beings, they sent out an email blast to everyone they could reach, and they said, you guys, the sages have gone to the Himalayas. We are down here on our own to deal with this mess, and we've got to do something, so make ready, and I'll send you the next announcement soon. But everybody got the email somehow. The demons, or the asuras, the bad guys, as well. So everyone's on alert, and they all start collecting. And meanwhile, the devas cried out to the creator Brahma, "Oh, creator, you must come back. You must come back here and send your sages and help us. This is not good, and we can't do anything about it." And the creator said, well, the problem is that Shankashura, who's the head demon, demons and angels, or asuras and devas, all lived with civilization. It was all blended then. So those guys have been sent by Shankashur from the bottom of the ocean and the bottom of the Ganga, which ultimately reaches the ocean, to go to the earth and to take the Vedas and to remove them from the earth plane. Vedas represent the stronghold of civilization. The Vedas teach how to behave, how to live, right way of living, right way of behaving. And as long as they're present and the teachers are teaching from them, then society stays high-minded and growing. But Shankashur sent his demon sons to go and retrieve it and bring them and remove them. And that's causing this terrible decline. So the devas said, okay, first thing we have to do is find the Vedas and bring them back and restore them on the planet. And then maybe Brahma will come and help us. And then there's a hope of a chance that we can try to reverse this situation that we put ourselves in, and everybody's head was hanging low. So remember, everybody had heard the notice about coming together, and they all came together, and they're starting to scramble on the town square about what are we going to do. But the devas knew that the Vedas had been taken and were under the ocean. Now, work with me on this part. There was Mount Kailash, called Meru. Mount Kailash represents the complete center of the planet, and think about your own Meru, your own Mount Kailash, the spine, center of being. There was Kailash. Wrapped around it 3¼ times was a snake, Sheshnag, and snake, Kundalini energy. We'll come back to that in a second. And so the devas had a hold of the snake, and the asuras had a hold of the snake, and the devas are pulling this way, and the asuras are pulling, and they're flowing, and this action is happening back and forth. And what's happening is Meru, or Mount Kailash, starts to churn with every pull. It's turning this way and this way and this way and this way. Spinal twist. Spinal twist. You're churning the ocean. The navel is the ocean, and with your spinal twist, you're churning. And the first thing that came out of the water was poison, came to the surface. First thing you do when you intensify your practice or start a very disciplined practice or moderately disciplined practice, if anybody has experienced it, is the ick stuff comes forward first. What is this? Where did that come from? I haven't thought about that in years. Why is this coming across my mind? Well, because it's in there, and you're doing your asana, and you're doing Agnisara, and it's churning the ocean, and the poison comes to the surface. What do? Let it go. Let it fall away. Don't study it. Let it just fall. So I can tell you, I won't tell you. It's you let it go. You don't start examining what just came out of you. You let it go, right? All right. So everyone was in a panic. What are we going to do? No, we brought this poison up. What do we do? And they called upon Shiva, who gracefully came and said, don't worry, I'll drink it. And Shiva drank the poison, and that was the only one who could take care of it. Rudra, the destroyer, took care of the poison and saved everyone at that stage. So then, as the churning continued, here comes Kamdenu, the cow who nurtures all. Have you heard the term Kamdenu? It's a lovely name. It's not a mystical cow, we could say it is, but it's in the scriptures. And Kamdenu represents all forms of nourishment from the Divine Mother, from the Divine Feminine, the collection of forces that are motherly. Kamdenu is that representation on the planet, although she's a celestial cow. And she came, and that meant that nourishment was being restored upon the land. This is a good sign. The next theme that came was a beautiful white stallion. This means the senses and the quality of mind is going to be restored. All of this was coming from the churning of the ocean under which sat the Vedas, remember? So as we're churning through whatever asana practice we're doing to do this, or pranayama, or meditation, we can anticipate that these promises and that these qualities will arise in us as well. Next came the minerals, the herbs, healing, health, sustenance, and then came a hand with a pot up out of the water, and then the arm, and then arose Dhanvantari. He's the founder of, or the seer of Ayurveda, sister science of yoga. Everyone's familiar with Ayurveda, the healing science. So he comes with a pot, and the pot is called a kumbh. And in the pot was immortal elixir. Also, you could call it a pool of healing elixir, pool of healing power, or amrit. Maybe you've heard these terms. Where is that inside? In the spinal column, and this is your kumbha, the ajna, right? In the center of the forehead, not here, but in here, all right? That's yours. So here he comes with this. Well, when the Devas saw that, they said, oh, we need to be sure and get that, because anyone who drinks the amrit will become immortal. And we can't let the asuras become immortal, or this consciousness will stay forever. And the asuras said, just what we want, but we need to get our hands on that so that we can drink it and become immortal. And Shankashura will be so proud of us because this consciousness will be here to stay. So a tussle ensued. And Dhanvantari is doing his best to hold it steady and to hang on to it, but of course it tipped. And there are many versions to this part of the story, but 4 drops fell, actually 3 drops, and the whole pot spilled. 3 drops dropped in 3 different cities on the continent that is India. And the pot spilled at a place where Ganga and Jamuna and Saraswati meet. Where it spilled is the Agya of the planet. Hold that thought. We'll come back to that. So our society can use improvement. We need to bring change if we are to expect anything different. When a consciousness takes hold, when it's as vast and perpetuating as what we live in now at this time, there's a momentum. And that momentum will keep rolling and pick up speed as it rolls, unless or until a force of another kind from another direction encounters it and takes it in another direction, or even contributes and neutralizes or mitigates it. Without another force to intervene, what is to stop a consciousness or a way of thinking and being from stopping? We all, or many of us, use smartphones. Smartphones give me freedom. I love having a smartphone because I can move around and do my work all day instead of staying locked to a computer and have to separate how I work. It's extremely valuable in this day and age. And it's a consciousness that is not likely to change. We're not all likely to say we don't want to work with smartphones anymore. Because if I stop working on a smartphone, I just got left behind from all of you. Do you know anybody who doesn't work on a smartphone? Do you know what they do? Well, I only check my email once a day, and it's only in the morning from 9 to 10. So if you want to reach me, you have to email me then. Oh, really? We are a week ahead of you by the time it's 10 o'clock in your world. Don't expect everyone to catch you up. You catch on. We're going, and you're way behind. But I have many friends, and they're all over, I don't know. I can't say age because it's not true. It's not age related per se, but it's a curious consciousness. But how many of us are willing to drop out of the game and stop using smartphone technology because we want to be a little more connected to nature and to people? There'll be nobody to connect to. Everybody's on their phone. There's no one to talk to if you're not on your phone. Get on your phone. The reality is in there. It's not out here. So there's a momentum. Do any of you have any fear in your lives? I don't mean inside even, I mean externally. Do any of you live in fear? Is there competition in your workplace? Does your colleague throw people under the bus at a drop of a hat? Do you have to watch your back because the new person is so sharp that she's annihilating everybody else who's been there for 10 years because of her quickness and techno savvy? Is this hitting a button with anybody? Are you in competition with another yoga teacher for the same group of students? Is there stress when you find out one of your students went to somebody else's class? It goes on and on. So if we don't participate in this consciousness, we get run over. Maybe you don't want to be engaged in fear, but what's the alternative? If you don't do it, your life becomes obsolete, essentially. Unless you can go to your cabin and be free from it all and be fully sustained and conduct your life the way you wish, a little bit like the rishis in the caves. Does anyone connect with this? Am I on track? So how do we get out of a society driven by fear? How do we change that? Or how can we allow ourselves to be different than that and still survive, still manage, still achieve, still accomplish, still make it? This is a serious question because the alternative, dropping out, doesn't work. I don't know how it works exactly. Not for masses, not for all of us. Maybe one person can figure it out. Maybe one person can go to the Himalayan Institute in Khajuraho and be there year-round. And if you can, then do it. That's awesome. But not many of us can do that. So this is the quandary. And something has to help us, just like the sages and rishis tried to help the humans at the time of the story we just told. We need something that's not coming from darkness to counter darkness. We need a brighter light than what we have to turn on, to shed the darkness such that it starts to turn. The table starts to turn. The consciousness starts to change. People start to look up from their phone and say hello. People start to say, let me get your pencil here. People start to say, are you hungry? I have an orange from my tree. There's Jean. And it's not likely to happen unless there's another force that acts upon the current consciousness. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. You've probably tried. It might have worked for an evening. The kids calmed down. You took the phones away. You played Monopoly. I don't know. And by the next morning, though, they're on it again. It's just, it's the way that it is. So we need something different. I was speaking to my friend the other day, who's a yoga teacher in Chicago. And she that day was particularly exasperated and disappointed, agitatedly disappointed in our world and what to do about it. And she's sensible, but she's excitable. Vegas had just happened. She's aware, of course, of the fires. And this woman has dedicated her life to yoga. In fact, she started in LA years ago and then moved to Chicago, and she's been teaching ever since. And she said, I'm just at a complete loss in terms of what to do. I just have no idea where to go with all of this. But I keep doing. I just keep doing. she's saying like this, and I thought she can't find the words to articulate what's happening for her, but she's staying positive, essentially, but she's at a loss. And I said, what is it that you keep doing, actually? And she thought, and she said, well, I focus on love throughout the day, and I don't gossip, and I'm not criticizing myself as much, and I'm really trying not to criticize others. And I think about my mantra whenever I can remember in the day. And of course I do my practice in the morning. And I just hope, and I'm just doing and I'm hoping, was how she responded to that. We should all recognize and take a moment to understand well with ourselves that that is not enough. It's too late. That is helpful in keeping our own mind field positive. It's helpful in not chewing on the past or on concerns about the future or the conflict that's sitting in your life right now. It helps keep that at bay. Definitely, it's a good idea not to gossip. That goes nowhere. You spend your energy from your practice in the morning on goofy stuff that's not going to change anyway. It's entertainment. And criticizing, that does no good. It knocks you down. All of this drains prana. And if you're building prana in the morning through your practice, then what's the point of spending it that way? Just take a walk, go through the day, go home and do a relaxation, and it keeps building. So she's very wise in that regard. But that is not enough to bring a change in the situation she was so exacerbated about, which is our world and what we're all doing to one another. And I imagine she's not the only one who feels this way. If the scope of our memory went back thousands of years, we would be able to recall what the technique is, what the technology is for bringing about a change in a consciousness that's rolling and spreading. But we don't have that memory, and as much as we try to figure out, well, what would it be? What could it be? We're not likely to tap into it because it's an extremely technical, extremely well-planned, deciphered, clear science for bringing change in collective consciousness. Did you know this existed? This is the good news. We didn't know. So you don't have to have angst anymore. We didn't know that there was something already created that would do it. The people who know this are those who do have a scope of memory, and they have an experience such that it's a part of them. This knowledge and wisdom is a part of them. And they remember and they know, and they are completely competent in executing something on a very, very large scale, something that has many layers and many steps and can take years to do in order to do that which starts to initiate the change, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So my friend didn't get any relief in the conversation with me. I told her when I come there, I'll be there in about a week. I said, when I come, we'll talk further, and I think you will feel hopeful. And she said, I really hope so, and I'm very sure she will. So I'm looking forward to getting to Chicago for her. But meanwhile, we have a task in front of us, and we have a couple choices, and you here today are a complete auspicious sign that there is enough interest and passion to bring change that it will come. The number 1,000, not 999, not 500, the number 1,000 is a critical number when it comes to negating or nullifying negativity, destruction, anger, greed, fear, everything that spins out of that. 1,000. Why? That's probably a whole discussion in and of itself, but think about Sheshanag. We mentioned that earlier, but the 1,000-headed snake of Patanjali. Remember stories about this? There was a cobra, and all of a sudden 1,000 heads came forward, and there was a dictation given by Patanjali, and there were 1,000 students who all collected the dictation at once, and it created a particular scripture. You, of course, think about 1,000 petals here, and 1,000 is found in other places as well. Well, 1,000 is a number that is a critical point after which collective consciousness can shift by means of mitigating and neutralizing negativity, anger, destruction, violence. There are, what, 40 people sitting here? 45? Over 50. We're almost there. There are over 50 in San Francisco. Everywhere I go, there will be this many at least. We will have 1,000 people who are interested in combining, I suspect, to reach 1,000 to tip the scale. It doesn't take that much. Just think of it. If 1,000 people who are like-minded, who are engaged in a structured, purpose-driven technique or technology for shifting consciousness, then we've got this. I say humbly because you don't want to say that kind of thing, but it's in our range to bring change. And I hope that leaves everyone sitting comfortably right now. Yes? Okay. So, historically, when society was in a situation like we are now, or the other story, these are the kinds of things that had happened. Go back to 16th century. There was a sage whose name is Samartha Guru Ram Das, and his name meant capable master, interestingly. And at that time, there was prevalent violence. It was an atrocity throughout the continent of India, which was a much bigger geographical area at that time. And he said, this has just got to come to an end, and it was way beyond what humans could do to stop it. The momentum was rolling with that violence. And so he conducted a group practice. And practice to change consciousness does not always have to be done with a group of people. It can be done internally. That's the Samkhya tradition. But if you use Kala or Mishra Tantra, then you would involve others. And what it does is give everyone else a chance to be a part of this, which is a huge boon, because their consciousness immediately takes the shift at the time of the practice, and then they go forward as a light to others, and that helps exacerbate the shift throughout others. So it's a boon to humanity when a sage or a rishi who's doing this kind of practice opens it up to many others. So he did that. And at the end of the practice, a man appeared to him. His name was Shivraj. And Samartha Guru said, why have you come? And he said, why did you call me? And so they both decided it must be to take care of this violent atrocity. Shivraj turned and walked out and shook the nation of violence in whatever means. And it was eradicated, and peace was restored, and nonviolence was restored, and humanity improved from there. That's one example. After the Mahabharata, we talked about how bad it was after, and people were paralyzed from grief and not able to have any access to resource and so forth. And so the practice that was done then was called Ashwamedha Yajna. And this is a practice that involves fire offering, but also many, many years and many, many steps of procedure and practice in order to conduct it. And it's done when there's a major shift that needs to happen. And healing and nurturing came back into society and came back on the planet, and that's how civilization got going again. And then more recently, you remember hearing about the Rajas in India, the fact that India was ruled by kings for some time, for years? Well, at one point, not so long ago, in the 1800s, there were 50,000 kings ruling India. They weren't ruling India. They were all bickering and battling with one another, and the people were totally disregarded. So people were starving, and people had no vocation, and there was drought, and the kings weren't paying attention to the people or the land at all. They were bickering for territory and fighting and killing and maiming, and it was a mess, and no one could overturn it. And so there was a practice done. It said, this is controversial. It is published. It's in the Al-Bashan's Source of Indian Tradition. This is a 2-volume book. It's on Amazon. But it's well known by a lot of scholars in Vedic studies. This book is referred to often, so everyone says it's authentic. He says that, and I've had confirmation beyond Al, so I feel confident in sharing this. He says that there were a number of sadhus in the Lucknow area, northern India, who did it more internally, more Samkhya method, not including a whole lot of people, and they did this practice for shift. That's when the British entered India. That the Rajas were knocked away, that system was demolished, and that's when the British came in. Now, I'm not sure how you feel about the history, but the British, the British brought the whole railway system. They brought universities for the first time. Prior to that, it was the family of pundits who were teachers of the royalty, who educated all the children of the village or the city. There were no university systems or education systems prior to that. And we don't have to go further, but that is a change brought on by a spiritual practice that is designed to shift consciousness. So you see the impact. There's a proven track record that it works, and that's what we have available to us right now. Does anyone have comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, disputes? Feel free. Yes?
I'm on board, and I'm wondering if a movement such as that takes a leader of a spiritual.
It takes someone who knows how to do a practice called Rudra Yoga. It absolutely does. I'm glad you're on board, first. And secondly, yes, it takes someone who not only knows how to do it, but is versed and well practiced and actually accomplished in all the practices that are involved as preparatory and ancillary practices leading to or setting the stage for the heart of that practice, which I'll explain to you. By virtue of being here today, you are hereby a part of a grand Rudra Yoga practice for the shifting of collective consciousness. You don't have to sign anything, it's not like that. And you don't have to do anything, it's not like that. But if you yourself are an enlightened activist, if you wish to contribute your mind and heart and your energy and your tapas or your discipline to being 1 in 1,000 who tips the scale under the leadership of a person who knows how to do this, who's asking for 1,000 of you, then welcome, you're a part of this practice. There's very little you need to do from this moment to a more participatory moment, and we'll cover that before you go today. And we will count you as the 50 plus people in Marin who are helping to reverse this momentum that is so strong today. Yeah. Can we proceed? It's okay. All right. So the Rudra Yoga, Yaga means ceremony. Rudra it means a lot of things. It's a name given to Shiva. Shiva, not a person, but Shiva, the fierce forces of nature who are responsible for demolition. You hear that Brahma is the creator. These names, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, these are not people. This is a name given to a collection or a quality of energy that we have in us and that you find outside of us as well. So Brahma is the creator. Vishnu is the sustainer. Vishnu governs life as it exists. That would mean right now. And Shiva is the demolisher. Have any of you been doing your practice and all of a sudden something really painful comes to your mind and it's like it takes over and it brings you to your knees and you just lay down and cry? Probably not. Anybody have that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. And you might feel like, oh my God, I am being annihilated. And it's severe. It's painful, right? It's like your whole identity just went up in dust or smoke. And you're lying there, and you're just waiting to die. You know this is death, and you're surrendering to death because it's over. And then when the grief passes, and you open your eyes, and you have the strength to sit up and grab a cup of tea, and you think, oh my God, like, I feel better. I actually feel better. Ew, how long was I holding on to that identity that now that it's gone feels like a bag of rocks around my neck? What was I thinking? Well, we were thinking that that was everything we are, and now that it's been demolished, or now that the forces of Shiva, of Rudra, have crushed you, you realize that was not me in totality, that was actually a burden I've been carrying around, being that, and I don't even want to be that anymore. I just didn't know I was anything else. So Shiva this energy has taken place in your life, certainly, and so it's nothing to be concerned about. In fact, it's very benevolent, but the way it works is pretty crash and burn, if you will. So a Rudra Yoga is a practice to invoke Rudra, life force, the life force, creator, Jatavedas, the fire of everything, the fire that is the subtle living being beneath, if we could see, everything that exists. Beneath plants, beneath animals, or within them if you look deep enough. If you look deep enough in someone's eyes, you see behind the eyes to the Rudra that exists in you as fire. This is what we're invoking. This is what is being propitiated in a Rudra Yoga. It's saying we lack nourishment, we lack patience, we lack wherewithal, we lack discipline, we lack many things that a stronger fire can make better in us, and we recognize that we need that in order to bring change in what's happening. We are declining. We want to become that which we've never considered that we could be. And the fire that transforms, is that which can make that happen, and that is called Rudra. So in a Rudra Yoga, the petition, if you will, is that Rudra come forth, that the nurturing forces of nature activate, become more available, infuse space. We are a football field of space. Infuse space with this transformative fire and all the forces of nourishment to bring things back into balance. In particular, Rudra travels with a vast range of Shaktis, or a vast range of energies, qualities, forces with quality. And if you're familiar with the term Sri Chakra, then you know Sri Chakra is the infrastructure of the human being on a subtle level. So if you could see through me or see through yourself or look inside yourself, you would see a particular geometric shape that is the subtle form around which our karmas come and our flesh comes and everything else that makes us up. And there are particular places in this geometrical form where different energy forces reside. And we have the fierce and we have the benevolent. If your fierce is not awakened, you can never get angry. You don't speak up. You can't make something happen. You're softer and milder. You have fierce forms in you. You have compassionate forms in you. The whole range is there. And your Rudra, our Rudra, is at the navel, the fire at the navel. Jatavedas Agni is the fire of consciousness that pervades every nook and cranny of space. That's comforting. There's something in the space. There's an intelligence, a divinity in the space, outside us and inside us and all through us, in the form of fire, that is handling everything. We just need to pay attention to this. We've stopped paying attention to it, and that's the problem. All right? So we're going back to that. So in the Rudra Yaga, which is a technology for bringing change in consciousness, remember? It will bring change. There will be change. It doesn't need to happen like this, but it will happen in the way that it has the intelligence to happen. But it can happen in one of two ways. This is Tantra, the Tantra practice of Rudra Yaga. Rudra Yaga is a Tantra practice as opposed to a Vedic practice. Vedic just means way old, and Tantra means not quite as old. Tantra is the practice for the Kali Yuga, by the way. It's from that school that we know we can do less for more, and of course that appeals to greedy us in the Kali Yuga. So in the Rudra Yaga, it can happen Durga style. Durga, you might be familiar with Durga, the force of Durga, the feminine force, not a woman, but the feminine forces of no nonsense, right? Strong and fierce and slicing, no nonsense. Not negative, but she says, Lisa, I bring you nourishment. And Lisa says, oh, Mother, thank you, but I'm gluten-free. I don't do dairy. And she keeps going right past you and offers it to the next person. And if you're knocked out of the way, so be it. Any obstacle to bringing nourishment to her children will be demolished. This is Durga style. She will bring change. She will bring nourishment. She will restore balance. And any obstacle to that is just knocked out of the way. This is the Durga style. It involves violence. Meh. I'm saving many more. This is the style of that. So people would cry and not understand, and it's the way it goes. That's the way it is. And the other style is the Sri Vidya style. Sri, are you familiar with the term Sri? Sri means beauty, the embodiment of beauty and auspiciousness, of all things good, of abundance, many, many other terms, but just imagine the best of the best. So Sri Vidya is the other style, and in a Rudra Yaga that is Sri Vidya style, which is what we're doing, there's no violence. The forces of compassion, forgiveness, love. Think of a mother and a baby. Does the mother mind every time the baby needs a diaper change? No, she kisses the bottom, for heaven's sakes, right? It's that kind of love. Lisa, please, you come this way with me, and won't you come too? We have food here. In fact, let me give you some, and if you'll come with me, I have almond milk right over here. It doesn't matter what someone says when nourishment is being delivered. She brings everyone to the table. This is the Sri Vidya style. And so this practice that is actually underway already is Rudra Yaga Sri Vidya style. And what this practice is asking is, please, when this transition comes, as perhaps it's already happening because it must be happening on layers, let this be compassionate, forgiving, loving for all, not the slash and burn, and may we have a peaceful transition. May we bring a close to the Kali Yuga, and may that accelerate the ushering in of the Sat Yuga. And that is the time when everything is more high-minded and safe and wonderful. So, sidebar, hurry and intensify your practice, because get in as much punya. Punya is good karma. Get in as much punya as you can before the shift, because it's going to be harder to do practice later. You'll be doing the same Mahamrityunjaya practice or Nirvana practice for years for the same fruit that you can have right now. It's fair to promote that, right? Okay. So again, we'll talk, anyone afterward who'd like to talk about mantra, we'll do that. So depending on the, okay, so then the heart of a Rudra Yaga is a fire offering. Setting the stage is a much longer ordeal, and the heart of the practice actually can happen in 12 days. This one in particular will happen in 12 days in February of 2019. The preparatory practice takes years. This one is taking, I think, up to 2 years. It started a while ago. So the spiritual leader who has the knowledge to do, the practitioner, who is a master of a Rudra Yaga, has planned out the preparatory practices, thought about it a while ago, knew when the exact time was to do it, and put things into motion. Some of the preparatory practices must be tied to certain things like the celestial positioning of certain planets, the position of the sun, and where it is in the zodiac at certain times. I'm sorry, I do not know astrology, so I cannot elaborate, but my point is that it's not random. It has to be tied to a much larger calendar. And once those practices are locked in, then the ancillary practices are placed in terms of time and capacity, and then this rolls out. And this is underway. Now, depending on the goal of a Rudra Yaga, this determines how much preparation needs to be done, and therefore how far back it needs to be planned and when it takes place, or the intensity with which it's going to happen. So if your intention is to do a Rudra Yaga, Sri Vidya style, for the shifting of collective consciousness from anger and fear to love and compassion, to say it briefly, that is a very large goal. That is larger than two of the examples that I gave. The Mahabharata, that was a very large goal as well, and that was 10,000 years ago. So this is the goal. Long ago, the most powerful weapons on the planet were held here, in the mind. The mind could yield and wield weapons. Mahabharata talks about it. It's hard to fathom that your mind can be that strong and that focused, but it can. And it is that kind of mind that needs to be engaged in this sort of practice, because the intention is unwavering, the focus and concentration is absolutely undisturbed. And when that energy is conducting this sort of practice, then it's not likely to not happen. If I try to stick with a certain practice for X amount of days, do you ever find yourself 1 week out thinking, oh my gosh, I missed it the last 2 days, what was I thinking? Where did my mind go? Well, it went into this and it went into this, but yeah, well, I lost 2 days. What are you thinking? All right, we struggle with that. This is not that. This is a very different kind of mind that sustains this. So, to bring the energy that would be generated by propitiating Rudra, remember that's a force, a particular type of energy, an energy that will demolish, but softly. And it'll demolish the current consciousness that exists, you don't have to worry, it's not a scary thing. The amount of energy that would be generated when invoking Rudra for this particular purpose is so great that an enormous amount of Shakti energy, or the motherly energy we're talking about, love, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, it's okayness, an enormous amount of that energy must be generated in advance to be concentrated and collected to be able to hold the energy of Rudra that's brought forth for this change. What this holding and bringing forth means is subtle, but if how can I say? we can handle what we can handle, and what we can't handle, we can't handle. And if someone or something or some really great force of energy appeared, we may be able to handle it or may not. Oh, so Christ was with his apostles, and he invoked Moses and Elijah, and they appeared, and the apostles fainted. It was too much. It wasn't negative. It was too much. Their energy was too much, and it was a little bit shocking, and they lost consciousness. So your own self-protection system will shut you down if something is too strong or happening. This is why people faint sometimes. They get shocked and they faint. It's too much. You can't take it in. So the proper preparation needs to be done so that that energy of Rudra can be absorbed, can be contained and absorbed, such that it doesn't make us faint, but it is collected and kept, and from there emanates and brings nourishment to everyone. So an enormous amount of Shakti energy needs to be generated. Would you like to take part in that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's the practice that we have for you. It's called the Sri Sukta. Sri, embodiment of beauty and auspiciousness and goodness. Sri Sukta is a prayer. It's a prayer, it's a hymn, it's a sukta. That means the same thing. It's 15, 16 mantras. Don't worry, there's a foolproof way to learn them. It comes with the yes, that you get the learning of it too. The Sri Sukta invokes the Shaktis, or the feminine forces of energy in you that are benevolent, loving, kind, forgiving, compassionate. It invokes in the Sri Chakra in you those benign forces to awaken and come forth and be more present. You become, by virtue of doing the Sri Sukta, kind, loving, compassionate. And the Sri Sukta at the same time eradicates fear. It finds it, sheds light on it, and eradicates it, whether we know that that fear exists in us or not. We don't have to know, it's going to go. This is invaluable, because many of us will live for a long, long time with subtle fear that we can't quite get to, unless we're doing some serious sadhana. This is what Sri Sukta does. This is what it does for the practitioner. What's happening externally, or in a more subtle way outside of you, the practitioner, is that those forces of Shiva are being awakened, because we are all petitioning through Sri Sukta that they please come. Remember the story of the Kumbh Mela, and before turning the ocean, the Deva said, Lord, please come and help. We can't fix this ourselves. This is what you do. You're calling upon these feminine forces to please come. And it's not women versus men. We have feminine and masculine. It's the feminine ones. There's enough of the other forces in the consciousness right now, isn't there? Bullying, anger, and we do that. It's not that it's not within us, but anger, bullying, and aggression, exactly. And those days are over. They're just done. It's not even we hope those days will be over. Those days are done. And now we're bringing in stronger the forces that are much more nourishing and much more supportive of life and growth. So you're doing what's happening on the inside, you're also contributing to on the outside. And remember 1,000. When 1,000 of us are practicing the Sri Sukta, that's enough for someone who knows how to do a Rudra Yaga and is conducting a Rudra Yaga to take that energy generated and use it to contain the energy of Rudra when it's time to invoke that in the heart of the practice and bring a new consciousness to prevalence. You're already in it by doing the Sri Sukta. Your shift is already happening. You're now on this side of the concern. You are now an enlightened activist. You are now a force of change. It can't be stopped. It's in you. It's what you are. And anyone around you will be affected by this energy just because of your presence. And you'll know this change has happened, not because you're watching it happen in yourself, not because you're getting excited and a little bit proud because you are getting brighter. That's not how it's going to happen. There is no chance of ego getting involved or mind playing tricks on us. It's that beautiful of a way that it works. You'll know because one day you'll be at Whole Foods. You'll be in line. It might be a little bit of a long line. And you find the Sri Sukta starts playing in your mind and you think, yeah, that's a good idea. That's what I should do while I'm standing in line. Let me do the Sri Sukta. And in your mind, you're reciting this hymn, this sukta, and you're enjoying it and your eyes open for a second. And you notice the person behind you, but she moves to the side. You notice that someone's looking at you. You can just tell. And you turn and you see that someone is looking at you like this. And you have enough intuition to understand, okay, I must be glowing. And she must notice, or she feels, or there's peace that this woman is connecting with. And it's a little bit bewildering, or it seems a little bizarre. It's bizarre to stand in a grocery line with your eyes closed, smiling and glowing. But this is how you notice, so innocently, that something has changed in you. And at that point, all you can do is simply smile and be grateful, because you know it wasn't a facade, it wasn't an effort on your part. It's actual, it's real, it's noticeable by others, and you are having an effect on humanity in this way. She'll go home different, and she'll absorb that energy that she noticed by you. She's going to seek you out if she gets your tags, probably, and that'll be a good thing, because that's how it spreads from one person to the next. The Sri Sukta is all about the Divine Mother. Divine Mother meaning a collection of forces that are fierce as well as benevolent, but it calls upon the benevolent ones to come forth. The Sri Sukta describes the Divine Mother in terms of Lakshmi, which is abundance, gold, resplendent glow, luminous, golden light, who is full of nourishment, looking for her children to nourish. This is the petition, this is the prayer. But it's actually not to the Divine Mother. It's to, remember, Jatavedas Agni, the consciousness of the universe. It's to the all-pervading fire. If you took the whole creation and you put it all back from where it came from fire. And it's that fire that we're propitiating, and it's that fire that you're calling out to through the Sri Sukta, saying, please, Jatavedas, bring the Divine Mother Lakshmi to me, or take me to her, so that through you, fire of consciousness, her fire, or your fire, Jatavedas, who is the Divine Mother, and my fire can unite, can remember that they're one, that my fire, that my consciousness can remember that I'm one with this fire, and that her qualities will be enlivened in me such that she and I, or these wonderful forces and my forces, are one. And that is my prayer, and that is what the Sri Sukta is saying. So do you see how integral this prayer is to the practice, and do you see how personal it will be to you as you start practicing? All right, Jean, should we send it out? Nikki, are you able to help Jean pass out the prayers?